This is the Business Chat. And welcome back to the Business Chat. I'm still your host, Drew Moore. They've not removed me or fired me, replaced me for any reason yet. I'm here with a couple of special guests. First for the show, we've got two guests plural. We have Hector and Jonny from eLearning Partners. What's going on, guys? How you doing today?
Doing good, my friend. It is great to be here. We are extremely excited. And thank you again for having Jonny and I on the podcast.
It's much cooler in our office than yours right now.
Yeah, I said before we hit record, the AC's out here. So for the beverage of choice, I definitely steered away from the warmer variety of coffees and teas and such today. But yes, it looks nice and frosty in your in your lovely studio. So of course we have, e-learning professionals here with a green screen and with nice lighting, and you guys have theater black. So I'm loving just the look you guys bring to the visual side of the show today. So I met Hector, as I do with most folks on LinkedIn. He's got a wonderful narrative, as does Jonny. We got to know each other. Jonny and I have just met. And eLearning Partners really does bring this neat narrative and distinctive to their space. And today we're going to get into that and a few other things. But before we do, in business chat fashion, what are you gentlemen drinking? Jonny, why don't you go first?
Well, I got a local kombucha from Happy Leaf Kombucha. I am obsessed with kombucha. People say that I am fueled by sparkling water and kombucha.
There we go. All right, great. And Hector.
Boom, everybody. I'm Greek, which means that coffee is in my blood. I am drinking a coffee right now. This is a big shout out to Boxcar Coffee. They are located in Boulder, Colorado. It was a husband and wife business, and now they're super successful in a lot of different cafes around Colorado. Won't be surprised if they're outside of Colorado too. So Boxcar Coffee, my friends.
Heck yeah, and with enthusiasm too. Great. And I'm drinking a local here in LA County, Claremont's own Claremont Craft Ales. I got a nice, so we really have the variety. We have sparkling water. Of course, my guests are drinking non-alcoholic. That's about right. This is 35 miles northeast. It's a nice kind of hazy, kind of summerish IPA. But hey, welcome to the show, guys. Let's do the virtual cheers.
Woo!
Cheers. Thanks for being on. All right.
That looks so good. I want
Oh yeah, it looks so darn good.
Let's pretend it's kombucha today. All right, perfect. So great. So yeah, we'll make sure we get all the information up too about these local drinks. It's again something we do as a fun little shtick because they love the love and we love to give it because we drink and consume these products all day long, and it's just fun to put that out there. Well, guys, here we are in the 30-ish minutes we've got. This is for our audience, and our audience is overwhelmingly in business, right? And they're aspiring business people. They are consumers of business. They're consumers of podcasts. But I would say in general today, you're talking to people that probably have all the misconceptions about your industry, as I do. They consume e-learning and don't know about it and all of that. So I'm gonna let you guys take it away, but just start with kind of the story. Hector, you gave me some really neat narrative of the two of you guys. Again, the reason we got both of you on is because it's the Hector and Jonny show, right? Talk about how and why you guys got into business, man, and how come you get along so well? You're not killing each other yet.
Absolutely, my friend. Well, I'm excited to jump into it, share a little bit about So Drew and I, we share that characteristic, that quality together, being Greek. Let's go. And I was actually, believe it or not, born and raised in Saudi Arabia. My father worked in IT in Saudi Aramco Oil Company. And I love sharing that part of my story because, right from the get-go, I was very blessed and had the incredible opportunity of being born in a melting pot of culture. I mean, everybody and anybody was anybody and everybody around the world was from there. I mean, it was incredible. So when you talk about cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, we were all together. And that was a blessing. And that, in addition, another blessing was the ability to travel around the world. I've had the opportunity, the blessing again, to be to 39 countries around the world. And Drew, a big part of my story is what I saw in developing countries. Didn't matter where I was. If I was in Kenya, if I was in India, if I was in Cambodia, no matter where I was, there were two things that I saw in common in each one of those countries: a love for personal connections and relationships, and also education. And one of my favorite stories to share is when I was location. There were multiple tour groups around the world that were there. And all of a sudden, about 15 to 20 kids local to the region came running up to us. No shoes, ripped shirts, and they weren't asking for money. Instead, what they were asking everybody in perfect English was, where are you from? And whenever a group would say where they were from, they would immediately, without hesitation, say the capital city of that country. And I fell in love with that because the the tour guide turned around to us and said, to these kids, education is everything. It's their way out of their circumstance, but more importantly, a way for them to reinvest in their communities to help their communities thrive. And I fell in love with that because part two of the education story is that I struggle with learning differences. I'm very dyslexic. I went to a private high school that you couldn't get accepted into unless you had dyslexia, but I had the resources. I was lucky. I was blessed. I had a family that could emotionally support me and financially support me. So when I finished high school, I knew that I wanted to enter the professional world and give back in education through my favorite channel, entrepreneurship. And that's when I met my best friend, co-founder till this day, on the first day of university at the University of Denver, where we met, built our relationship, friendship, business, love for education and people. And here we are almost 7 years later, rocking and rolling our business.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. So Hector, you said a lot of things there, but your background is obviously, colorful. It's complex. You saw that education, as you said at the end, kind of really stuck with me. That was the way out for a lot of these folks you were encountering. And tell me more about how that it's specifically impacted you, at least the drive to get into business. And maybe that's a segue where, Jonny, you can jump in, but I really want to hear more about how that kind of, is part of your passion.
Sure. No, that's a great question, Drew. I mean, truly, when it comes to business as a whole, I mean, in the world that we live in, it's all business, right? Even if you work at a school, it's a business, right? We need money to run, right? So to me, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, whether if it is in the public sector or the private sector or whatever the case may be, is individuals, employees, people having the lack of resources of knowledge to help them excel and take things to the next level, whether if it be a career or whether if it be, moving on to another position internally in their company. So I just saw from a business standpoint that so many companies, from a training aspect, I felt like they could do better. I can't tell you how many people that I've met where they've been struggling or they feel like they've plateaued and they want to grow, but they feel stuck, or, they feel like they could have done a whole nother career path if only they had X and Y education. And if we can help companies create that training and help them advance their employees, and then on the flip side of the coin, Drew, help incredible subject matter experts productize their knowledge and take the knowledge that they have and create it into courses to impact the greater market, now we're impacting the world. But Jonny here, you got to jump in, man. You got to say your story too, because this is a key part of what we're doing and how we're changing the world.
Yeah, and while Jonny, you're giving the story, Hector, if we don't have video feed of you guys for this interview, I've got a lovely screenshot of you two embracing like brothers in business, so we can always use that. But if you want to see if the video feed can come back up, great. If not, we can keep moving. But yeah, Jonny, please, I want to hear your input on what Hector's talking about.
So you lost our video feed?
Yeah, it's been a little choppy, and then we've lost your image, your picture, but we can keep moving with the interview if Hector's able to take a look at that, since there's two of you guys.
All right, Drew. Sorry about that.
Let's just do that still then. And I mean,
it's no problem.
Yeah. Okay. So where am I jumping in?
Well, that's the reality of these shows too. Is there's some posts that's going to be done, but if we keep all this in there, it's even more. What are they? Everybody's all about authenticity. There it is. We're all authentic, right? It's very authentic right now. So.
Okay.
Well, how about you start with your story?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, your story, Jonny.
So
please.
Hector and I met on the first day of college, and it's really interesting because we were very different people. He suggested in a floor meeting that we had, we lived on the same floor, and our RA asked the floor what kind of group building activities we wanted to do. And Hector, being Greek and very adventurous, stands up and says to everyone, "We should all go skydiving." And I'm in the corner and I'm just like not interested in skydiving, but that guy seems awesome. I want to become friends with him. And the rest is history. We had a bunch of classes together, and really the two major things we found out that we had in common were a passion for entrepreneurship and a passion for education. And specifically, looking at education from a different perspective. So, what do we mean by that? Well, what we mean is most people, when they are talking about education, they are talking about what learning objectives a subject matter expert or a teacher has to accomplish with their students. They have learning objectives for their students to learn. Well, what we have done is we have flipped it and have made it all about the learners. So it's more about what milestones can the learners achieve throughout their learning process that are important to them. It's not what's important to the teacher, it is what is important to the learner. So that's really what we do today. And where that really came from is, along with Hector's story of having kind of his entire life being wrapped around what is important to an individual that does have learning differences. I also, in college and after college, learned very differently when it came to my professional development training. So I am a CPA, so I am an accountant, and I also studied film in college. Well, when I left college, I went and worked for a Big Four accounting firm. And the e-learning that was available to me for my continuous professional education as an accountant, well, the information was there, and the information checked the learning objective boxes that the Board of Accounting has to continue your professional licensing. Same thing, lawyers have the same thing. All these different professions have these continuous education requirements that they have to do, but it's not about the learner, it's about the organization and the license. So what I found is that while I was getting this information, it was very hard for me to actually retain any of it. So that is when I actually left Big Four accounting, and Hector and I started eLearning Partners basically the next day to solve this learner.
So, what I heard you say too is that there's so many things I'm thinking to respond, and there's never time for all of it, but we see this a lot today, in education with testing, right? With traditional methodology when it comes to dumping information in the brain and saying, all right, what'd you learn? And I've always been this proponent of going, I don't know that this is working or it's the best way. And I feel like there's a shred of that disconnect that I sense as a kid. Terrible tester, if you couldn't tell what I was saying right there. But then ended up excelling, doing well in business and just all kinds of things. I had capacity, but that wouldn't come out in an SAT. And that wouldn't come out in the traditional methods. And I hear what you're saying, that there's this, there's a disconnect, I think is what you're trying to say. Yeah, absolutely.
But the other thing, so all of our listeners right now, what you should do is open up a tab on your computer browser or on your browser, whatever you have access to right now, and search e-learning. So if you search e-learning on Google, what you're going to find is technology. That's what you're going to find.
Yep.
And that's what most people think e-learning is. People have this misconception that e-learning is all about the technology. Well, without technology, you don't really have e-learning. But without content, you don't have e-learning. Without learners, you don't have e-learning. Hence, learning and learners. And without distribution, you don't have e-learning. So what people think about when they're thinking about online learning or e-learning is what a simple Google search shows them. Well, as you know, Drew, search engine optimization, pay-per-click advertising, that can really make people see whatever the organizations with the biggest ad spend have they can manipulate the answer to that question. So that's why most people we talk to, and they're like, okay, well, what is e-learning, or what does e-learning partners even do? Are you guys a technology company? We're like, no, we're not. There is a side to e-learning that's much more important than the technology, and it is what we call learner specs. So people think that e-learning is all about tech specs. We say it's all about learner specs. The learner is what matters most. You find out your learner specs, and then in the future, once you have all the content curriculum built out and tested on your learners for value, then you can bring this thing called technology into play.
Hey, well put. I mean, really, in the time I got to spend with Hector before Jonny, you and I met, he was very passionate about what you're talking about, and that is, and as you're talking, I think a lot of folks listening have experienced this, where you log into some portal and maybe it's for new onboarding, new hire, maybe it's for promotion, maybe it's again more required for continuing education, but it's definitely a very antiquated, or I should say, like you said, tuned to the technology and tuned to kind of going through the steps. And while technology's advanced a ton, we definitely have to sometimes take a step back, and no matter what advance we make, and say, hey, this now needs kind of the phase 2. I see what you guys are doing, Jonny, is both phase 2 and per this series, it's innovative. You're stepping back and saying, and Hector put it very well, and he said, what you guys are trying to do is optimize e-learning by focusing back on that learner, right? And pull back so much from the technology and help with this idea of blueprinting and really getting a tailored focus on the need for that group and their e-learning execution. So talk to me about, this kind of segues into I think the second half kind of our chat today is what would you say is the mission if you guys were to put it in a word? And it might be on the website. And I think I've seen a few things you guys have said, but really then what do you guys say, hey, our mission then is, or our distinctive we bring to the market is what?
Focus on your learners. I mean, that's really it. What we're really doing is we're simplifying e-learning so that anyone can do it. And why anyone can do it is because if you know your learner, that's all you need.
And I'll add to that too, Drew. For all the listeners out there, right? For entrepreneurs, for people in business and whatnot, we love to put this in a business context, right? If you think of e-learning, think of e-learning as a business, right? And your courses or your trainings are your product or your service, and your learners, your target audience. So for those of you business owners and entrepreneurs out there, if all you do is focus on your product and service and you don't care about your target market, or you don't even define who your target market is your product and service going to sell? Probably not. Same thing with e-learning, right? You got to know your learner. Your learner is, in this example, like your target audience. Who are they? How do they engage? What do they care about? What's their learning style? All those things influence what Jonny and I like to call the three pillars of e-learning: content, technology, and distribution, right? A lot of people think e-learning is broken down into steps. I got to find my technology first, then I got to populate it with content, and then I'm going to leave distribution for the very last thing. Well, e-learning, newsflash, is not about steps. It's about pillars. The difference between the two is that steps are, before you can do step 2, you got to do step 1. Before you can do step 3, you got to do step 2, etc. Pillars are, you got to construct them at the same time, like a 3-legged stool. If you leave one leg out, or if you don't care for one of those legs, you will tip over and fall. So you got to build content, technology, distribution with learners focused at every single one of those pillars. Because if you don't, then that 3-legged stool is going to fall over.
Yeah, you guys know your stuff. And I honestly, when you're talking, I'm cracking up because there's so many, parallels and metaphors in marketing that I see in my day-to-day with Suited, or whether it's just other friends in their businesses, this idea of things being in silos and out of sync, right? And like you said, it's a little out of order today when folks think of e-learning, they race for the technology. Understand almost the E in front of learning, right, guys? Kind of is already misleading. Oh, yeah, it's going to be online tech. It's a web application first, right? And I completely can empathize with some of your frustration. I can even say this probably to everybody listening. Instinctively, we all know what you're saying, Hector, is to be true. The analogy, of building a house is the case. You don't just start putting down a foundation and talking about things like the interior. You got the whole plan kind of, crafted out before. A term you used with me, Hector and Jonny, both of you guys can, either of you at any time can comment on this. You used a LTS, or the learner transformation statement, about defining that. Tell the listeners what you mean by the LTS and how that relates to what we're talking about.
Yes. So the LTS, the learner transformation statement, is the A to Z journey of your learner. So your learner will start with a certain amount of knowledge and a basically state of being before they go through your course. Then when they go through your course, they should transform into something else, right? So they should have the actionable knowledge to do whatever your course is about, to achieve their goals, whatever goal that you're literally promising that your learners are going to achieve once they finish their course. So the A component is where they start, and the Z component is where they are after your course. If they are unchanged, then you didn't provide value to your learners. And what that statement does, what the LTS statement does, the learner transformation statement does, is it really creates a very actionable roadmap for your learners to go on. So you have point A, then your milestones. So you have milestones that they have to hit on their way from point A to point Z. We like to say milestone instead of learning objective. So each milestone, they should have an actionable result. And then once they complete all their milestones, they get to that point Z, and they are transformed into whatever you're promising they're being transformed into.
And, the LTS is very exciting as well, Drew, and for everybody listening out there, is because, that, in taking that business example, that business context again, that's your value proposition, right? A lot of the challenges that we see out there, Drew, is you have a lot of companies trying to create e-learning, or people trying to get into the e-learning space, and taking that, the house analogy, right? They take a shovel and they're just digging. They got no blueprint. They don't know what they're doing. They're just trying to build something, right? With no clear direction, with nothing to come to. And that learner transformation statement, it impacts every single one of those pillars that we talked about: content, technology, distribution. If you have different team members or vendors or independent contractors or people that come in on the project, they know exactly what we're doing, what that course and what those trainings are about. Everybody is on the same page. It is absolutely critical to have that LTS defined.
And in marketing, we have to define conversion, which is essentially what you guys are saying with an LTS, right? We have to look at, the value proposition of a product or service and define that and make sure that that's meeting needs. And we put out NPSs and surveys, and we've gauged that. And so it's again, in marketing, I'm kind of chuckling as I hear you guys with your passion going, hey, it's upside down, it's backwards. And we're here to kind of, augment and innovate and come in and help basically consult and straighten where people are frustrated, right? And they're pouring, my goodness, I mean, you guys know better than I do, tens of thousands, millions of dollars into e-learning technology, into just the content. And you guys are here saying all of them are important, and it needs to be led with the learner. And I love you guys' passion about this too, because going back to Hector, where you come from, Jonny, you talking about Hector jumping out of his chair doing a cartwheel, yelling, hey, let's all jump out of a plane. I love it because it's real. It's hysterical, but it's real. And it's you two both bringing who you are, your unique DNA, to this business with a passion for helping businesses. And I love that. That's what this podcast is about. There's a lot of, I've been learning as I'm talking with a lot of folks that are checking out this podcast, and I'm running into that there's so many young people, you guys probably know this better than I do, flooding the market. They're all in their undergrad. They're out of college. They are drifting, looking for jobs, and they're going, hey, that barista gig with a certain large coffee company wasn't so bad now that I'm actually out here pounding the pavement. But I know for a fact a lot of people are interested in working from home now. We can talk in a minute about what the pandemic's done and how that's changed things or accelerated things. But there's definitely a move back to, how can I inject my knowledge and get paid for it? How can I use my skills one time, record it, capture it, use what I know and convert that and then add value? And everyone listening is thinking of that guy on Facebook or whatever other ad that's like, sign up for my course or whatever. And I'm talking more about true education, and guys and gals with some just tremendous knowledge and skill, and they may be interested in what you two are saying. What would you say to them in the sense of where there's need in your market in e-learning? Is it in the content, in the technology? Is it in the distribution? Is it really kind of in the consulting like you all are doing, all three? What would you say to kind of the young talent that's, their head's a little spun, right, after just what's gone on the last couple of years, and they're not really sure where to begin? And where do you see true market need for them?
So don't invent a new e-learning software.
Are you saying there's plenty of those? Yeah.
There are so many. We go to a couple conferences every year that have, just at the conferences, there's probably
1,000.
Yeah, 1,000 software providers. And they're all saying, we're different because, and it's just like, oh man, like I feel like that market has to be brutal.
And
it's brutal.
And coming from our experience too, Drew, and for people listening right now is we almost went down that path. We almost went down that path. We scoped it out. We built all of the tech specs, and we were ready to go down that path. And right at the last second, we said no, that's not the right avenue. Right.
Yeah, we were really close to having our own e-learning software, but we did our research and we're just like, no, this is not a good place to be. So what they should do, well, the biggest challenge that individuals and companies have with e-learning, if you're creating an internal or an external facing program, an internal program would be developing e-learning for your employees, for your contractors, for your team members, right? Maybe that remote kind of training that you could take anywhere. That'd be internal. External would be creating e-learning as a product to then be sold either to a business or to a consumer. Mm-hmm. If you are either one of those, internal or external facing e-learning, the biggest challenge people have is with distribution. And it's because people think that, okay, I'm going to make this amazing training program and roll it out internally for my organization so that we don't have to keep hiring people in HR to onboard people. We're just going to keep all the training here. And they put it out there and no one takes it because they're like, it's not a build it and they will come situation. It's a build it, then take a strategy to actually distribute it and onboard people into your program, and then they will stay if it's valuable. That's how it actually works. Everyone thinks, because we have the TikTok culture, the YouTube culture, everyone thinks that you make a piece of content, it goes viral and you're famous. Same thing with e-learning. People think that I'm going to make this amazing program and then people are going to find it and take it. It's like, no, there's this part called distribution that you have to have a strategy that works. The other side of the coin is people think that, okay, I know a lot about this subject. I'm going to build a course and then I'm going to sell it. Well, yes, you can do that. And as long as you figure out what the biggest pain points of your learners are related to that material, build your course around that, build all your marketing messaging around that, then yes, people will buy it, but you still have to have a distribution strategy. It's not just build a course and they will come. It's build a course, have a very intensive period of trying to get it distributed, and then if it's valuable, they will.
Not a nationwide, a worldwide learning conference in Orlando, Florida in 2019 before the pandemic. And I went to a breakout session. And this breakout session was all about how to engage your learners, your audience of your courses. And I got two stories. The first story is and the companies here, Drew, these weren't small companies. We're talking Disney, we're talking PwC, Deloitte, Qatar Airlines, HSBC Bank. We're talking about global brands. And the directors of HR, the head of education were in this breakout room from these different companies. And one individual stands up and says to the individual leading the breakout session, how do we engage our employees. Mind you, this is a global brand that was saying this. She said, we are so desperate to figure out how to engage our employees. We are putting GoPro cameras in the refrigerator. So when people open up the refrigerator for their lunch, they get shocked by finding a camera. That is how desperate they are to finding content that engages their learners. And another story alongside, same breakout session, there was another leader there, and I really appreciated her because she was vulnerable and open with what was going on in her organization. I'm a big believer in vulnerability creates relatability. And she was expressing that this prestigious hospital that she worked at, they were struggling. They had a whole department dedicated on creating training to engage employees, and they tried everything in the book, and she really expressed what was going on. After the breakout session, I found her to ask her a question, and I promise I did not ask this question in a rude or condescending way. I was honestly just curious. I looked at her and I said, you had mentioned that you're struggling to engage your employees. You've tried many things. And she said, yes, we've tried everything. And I looked at her and I asked, have you asked your learners? Have you asked your employees what they care about? Have you asked your employees what they want to learn, how they want to grow professionally, personally? Have you asked them? And she looked at me with her eyes open, her mouth open. And the first thing that she said was, I never thought of that. What a great idea. So focusing on your learners is so important. It's not about the technology like Jonny is saying. It is all about learners.
Yeah, and what Jonny said before, no, thanks, Hector. That's probably hitting home to some people. And definitely I'm hearing that kind of shaking my head as I know we're all conditioned to, finding out the answer from our today's crystal ball, right? The Google. And based on what's ranked and what comes up in e-learning, like Jonny said, it's technology driven. So I think the instincts today of, internal efforts, HR, management, and that culture of wanting to, again, connect with employees is driven by what practically what SEO and what Google results show, which is going to lead with technology. And that's a wave. And there's a story behind that you guys could unpack better than I could, but it's a fact. And I'm hearing you loud and clear. It's a very strong message you guys bring, saying this is a disconnect, this is a problem, and the answer's not far away. But they need a guide, right? Companies today are looking for a Jonny and Hector to come in and say it's not about, again, one of these things. It's about pillars. It's about stepping back, focusing on your learner, and defining again that LTS and what about them needs to be transformed, and reverse engineer that. And what it sounds so simple. I think that the trip up that we all run into, again, is because as we search for these things, and that's what we're going to keep doing, right, guys? I mean, that's just look at this next generation, just tuned to ask Siri where things are, what they mean, how to find them, what the weather's like. So there's a battle against what the, more popular page 1 and page 2 results show, kind of, in a sense, right? Yep. Versus it's like, technology's not a bad thing. In fact, you guys aren't here saying anything remotely, any remote semblance of that at all. You're merely saying that that's where folks have led, shoving GoPros into, refrigerators and to dump millions into technology when it might be something simple as a survey and breakout groups. And again, pulling back, I got to start to bring us down here and land the plane a little bit. But I love all the different variations of what you guys see in terms of the issues in this industry. Talk to me for a minute, you guys, about again, your space is crowded with technology. There's lots of providers, like you said, at these trade shows and these conferences you go to. Do you feel like there's a general awakening, a wave of folks doing what eLearning Partners is doing? Do you feel kind of alone? And do you feel like it's only been driven by the pandemic? Talk to me a little bit about the trend right now of what you guys bring. Kind of a little bit of it sounds like a lone voice in a sea, right, of technology and failed ideas. But yeah, tell me a little bit about how you guys feel about that space right now.
There are other organizations in the space that are focusing on similar things as we are. The gap that exists is most of these individuals are targeting individuals. So they are targeting the lone subject matter experts and professors who are brilliant and want to bring their knowledge into an online, scalable, digital product form. Where there aren't many, and it's actually really interesting, we work in the B2B space much more than the B2C space. We have we have a handful of, well, not even a handful. We have plenty of individuals who work with us, but we are mainly in the B2B space. And when we're bidding on projects, people are very surprised when they talk to us. And
yeah, how so? That's interesting.
They're very surprised. We do it a few different ways. I mean, people are really focused on, well, organizations in the e-learning space that develop content and are in consulting are really focused on, let's take the entire project, so the 100 hours of content that needs to be created, and let's guesstimate a price tag for that. And what we do is we come in and we say, okay, let's look at an hour of content, the hour of content that is most valuable for your learner, and let's start there. Let's build out a scalable process for you to build out this piece of content. If you work with us for the 100 hours of content or not, you're going to get value out of building this 1 hour with us. And then after you build that 1 hour with us and we test that hour on your learner, then we can talk about what to do with the full project. And what we found is we're actually, with our philosophy, able to do things exponentially faster than other organizations because we walk extremely slowly before we sprint. I just started becoming a pretty involved marathoner and ultra marathoner this year. I've always been
no kidding.
I've always been into health and fitness. But this year I really learned how important it is when you're running, especially long distances. And if you want to run long distances quickly, you need to warm up your body on any run that you do. If you want to have longevity in your body, you have to warm up. It's the exact same thing here in e-learning, and how we do things is we walk extremely slowly so we can sprint like Olympic athletes. It's just what we do. So that's the difference in the market of how we go about the B2B space. The other thing, and our course that's coming out that is different from the other courses out there related to online learning, is we are focused on the business side of this. We look at, okay, what are all the stakeholders involved? Because if you are not just a lone subject matter expert or professor starting your own digital information business for the first time, and you're an organization that has tons of subject matter experts, or you're an organization that just needs to scale their training with e-learning, there's a lot of moving pieces involved. And what we've been able to do is simplify all that. So there aren't that many people doing what we do in the B2B e-learning space. We do bid against people, but we take on projects much differently. And people have never, I don't think we've ever ran into someone who bids a project like we do yet. It's going to happen, especially because we're launching our course that our competitors are going to learn how we do all of it, and that's fine. But that is how the space looks that we play in.
That's what a great answer. And kind of as we bookend, I mean, that is in general what I feel like we all agree any business consulting and any outside help really needs to be, is to help really align, take time at the beginning to really make sure, again, all the end goal, kind of the end in mind, it's the basic stuff, and define that. And like you said, do some testing and research and make sure what you're about to scale works versus just, price tagging the project. I think that's, Jonny, it's a very cool approach. Very simple. And it's working. Sure.
Yeah, and if the organization hates working with us, great. they only spent X amount of dollars instead of exponentially more than that. So it like allows them to vet us. And I don't know, I think people are scared of allowing organizations to do that. So they're trying to lock them into a multi-month, multi-year contract that is X amount of dollars right away, when it's like, hey, work with us. We're going to prove to you why we're the best. And then if you don't like it, then great, move on, work with someone else. But we even tell everyone, if you're in the e-learning space and you're looking for vendors to work with, or if you're just looking to hire vendors in general, test them on a small project.
Great advice, folks, for anybody in business, anybody looking to engage with contractors, with third party, with consultants. Couldn't agree more. Same goes for what, again, I'm doing day to day with the creative agency, the marketing side. It's preferable, as you guys agree, right, from our end, to make sure the client's nothing short of in love with it and on the same page, because it just is friction for both parties when you're biting off more than you can chew. You mentioned launching your own course. In closing, I kind of wanted to ask what's next for you guys, and you kind of alluded to that. So you guys are going to be publishing your own courses in kind of 30-second, 1-minute version. Tell me what that's about.
Yeah, it's really cool. We're really excited about it because it is literally the A to Z of how to, if you have an idea for a course or you have training that you want to scale internally at your organization, but you don't know where to start, our course is literally the A to Z blueprint of how to go from nothing to live course providing value to your learners. It's pretty amazing. We're excited about it because it allows us to scale our knowledge internationally, and it is going to happen pretty quickly. I mean, it's the quickest way for us to be able to get our knowledge internationally in front of everyone who needs its hands.
Yeah.
Man, that's tremendous. Hector, do you have anything to add before we sign off here? But guys, it's been great. The time's been great. Again, I'm excited about the e-learning course, both you guys being on the show, taking time to just barely pour a drop out of what you guys are about. But Hector, any other comments you wanted to add in closing?
Absolutely, Drew. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much. We can't tell you how much we appreciate being on the podcast. We're honored to be here. For all the listeners out there, we want you to know that the reason why we chose eLearning Partners, our name, we actually asked our clients, we asked our community what name, how we should rebrand. And everybody, of course, wanted eLearning in there for a sense of what we do. However, everybody said partners, because we love to build relationships. They feel like we are a part of their team. So with that being said, we want to build a relationship with each and every one of you. Jonny and I are very active on LinkedIn. Let's set up a coffee. We love to learn and help out in any way that we can and just build a professional relationship. So let's definitely keep the conversation going. Focus on your learners. Remember, you are all subject matter experts, though. So if you haven't already, start thinking, how can you potentially productize your knowledge? How can you impact the world with the knowledge that you have? Excited to connect with each and every one of you.
Well, there you have it, folks. Check out eLearning Partners online. Their website is e-learningpartners.com, and you can connect with Jonny and Hector. We're going to link all their information here in the description of this episode on the website. But go ahead and check out their website. Look them up on LinkedIn. Special thanks to my neighborhood, Claremont Craft Ales, to Happy Leaf Kombucha in the greater Denver area, and Boxcar Coffee in Boulder. Jonny, Hector, guys, thanks so much for making time. I really appreciate it. Good chatting with you.
Thank you, Drew. Likewise.